Community safety meeting to order. It's Tuesday, September 12th. We've got an agenda in front of us. We've got one change to the agenda. We're going to add 1A, cameras, the Richmond's traffic intersection cameras, and we're going to make property use and parking enforcement monthly become 1B. We're going to go through 1A first, and then we will recess, go into closed, cover our closed, hear from Mr. Singer, and then go back into open. So, approval of the change in the agenda. All in favor? Thank you. Motion on the minutes? All in favor? Next committee meeting date is October 11th, 2023 at 4 o'clock here in Council Chambers. Number 1A, Richmond traffic intersection cameras. Councillor Heed, would you like to present this?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you very much. And I'm going to leave it to your expertise on what you want to do. It's a referral motion that's going to come forward. We can have my discussion on this, why I'm using it as a referral, or I could do the motion and then we could have discussion and debate after. So it's up to your the process you'd like to utilize here, Madam Chair.
Why don't you make the motion? We can put it on the floor for discussion.
Okay, the motion is that staff research, analyze, and recommend to the committee a process to elevate and use high-resolution traffic camera images for the purposes of criminal investigation and prosecution. Number 2, that judicial or other required oversight is considered to ensure compliance and prevent misuse. And number 3, that staff report back to the committee with recommendation or recommendations before the end of 2023.
Second.
Okay, so it's on the floor. Would you like to continue to speak on this?
Yes, I would, and I provided some key pieces, and I'm certainly will look to the mayor too, because he has been working on this for a period of time, I believe since 2017. This issue has been discussed in one form or another within our council chambers here. And certainly, I believe most of us are on the same page. I'm sure there's some people that may not agree, and I want to read the background because I think the background summarizes why I'm bringing this forward and why most likely previous councils brought this forward. And later today, we have a presentation that will certainly add to why we need something like this. As a result of the ongoing violent gang activity occurring within our city and elsewhere across the region, the need for progressive investigative assistance is vital to aid the police. Currently based on provincial administrative tribunal and or decision makers, our traffic cameras operate at a reduced resolution, which makes it impossible to identify license plates or vehicle occupants that travel throughout Richmond after a specific crime has been committed. Utilizing these images to assist the police at this time is useless, even if the footage is handed over or obtained through a production order or judicial authorization. The police are tasked with appealing for dashboard camera footage or other ways of collecting images that may help. This is often time-consuming and not necessarily beneficial, especially when the city can capture possible images through its own technology. Let's be clear, this process would only be acknowledged and used after a serious crime is being committed at a known area and after a request from the police. It will not be used in any other way. And irrespective of any pending or future judicial review that may be required, we need to show leadership and resolve in dealing with crime and safety for our community. And as I mentioned earlier, it was provided to council and this committee, a detailed capitulation of what has occurred since 2017 under previous councils. And the fact that we have hit this resistance from the Privacy Commissioner here in British Columbia. And I strongly believe, based on my knowledge, based on my experience, based on my research, that this is an issue that we should bring forward to protect our community. And if we are challenged on the decision that we make as elected officials in our community, that we undergo that challenge and use our resources to fight that particular challenge. I strongly believe we are on solid ground, and I'm sure the mayor will comment on the solid ground he thought this council was on previously, and the lack of leadership we got from the province on pursuing this. I also strongly believe that we will be successful, and when we're successful, other municipalities will follow what we are actually implementing here in Richmond to create that safe environment, to ensure that like the chiefs that are sitting in this room here have dealt with over the years in frustration of trying to solve some of the murders that take place, whether it's a shooting at Vancouver International Airport, whether it's a shooting on Miller Drive. We've got the ability to assist the RCMP in fulfilling their duty to ensure that they're investigating serious crimes that take place in Richmond.
Councillor McNulty?
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm very pleased to second that. Historically, we've met the brick wall. We've tried before, and we're told. And I appreciate the specifics, but I don't want to get us locked in, although I'm not going to change it, because to me, the cameras are public cameras, and they're for public safety. And I'd like to know, and I ask our staff in this, is the difference between dashboard information and what's on the camera. When you don't have to answer it now, but in a report when it comes back, what is the difference? Both cameras, aren't they? So it's something that I think this is extremely timely. And it's challenging. And the other question I had, to be quite frank with you, and staff can look at it, is has this dashboard cameras and cameras of this nature been used anywhere else in Canada for the same purpose? Just because there is this a British Columbia phenomenon, a government phenomenon, Councillor Heed has been across the water, so he knows the bureaucracy. And to me, it appears to me, given the timing of this, that the Privacy Commissioner needs to wake up in this day and age and start looking at public safety. This will go a long, long way to deal with safety. I'm not going to get into some of the other wording because it's a background, so I'm not going to try to change it because I think these cameras can be more useful in many, many ways for public safety and to support our police forces. So the sooner we get it, nowhere in there does it say, and again, to the mover, are we going to address the position of the Privacy Commissioner? And I think we should make it that an issue. But I'll leave that alone and up to committee to see when we go. Maybe as a result of the discussion that will come on.
Well, and perhaps that would be something that staff comes forward with as part of the recommendation.
Well, it could be, but it doesn't say specifically. But if it's inherent in there, I'm quite happy with it.
Okay.
We cover everything at this time. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
I fully agree with taking another run at this. And I think to the last, to Bill's comments, the position of the Privacy Commissioner is probably going to be a central issue here. We got a very helpful memo, kind of just data this afternoon from our GM this afternoon. And the one thing that it doesn't talk about, but it kind of implies it, is that I actually, in the last run, I actually met with the Privacy Commissioner, and I made the point. I said, listen, you allow someone with a dash cam to use, you can use that as evidence against someone or in favor of someone. You can use a restaurant that someone has in their private business, a restaurant or any other private business, but you only have a problem if the city purports to do the same thing. So in the example that Councillor Heed mentioned, you have the shooters at the airport, they're shooting at each other. I think they shot an RCMP officer, and they're escaping and they're shooting each other and they're shooting at the police. And we've got footage on this of people who are doing these criminal acts in a public place. And we have a privacy commissioner who says, notwithstanding that you're in a public place in the middle of an intersection, you're entitled to your privacy, notwithstanding no matter what you're doing. I think the point that is made, number 2, is an important point, and we stressed it the last time. You need a process for this. You can't have just someone coming off the street and saying, I want the images from this camera. You have to have, it's like a search warrant. So you go to an administrative official or a judge or somebody and make your case that you're entitled to this, you have a legitimate reason for it, it's probably going to be part of a peace officer's duty, and there will be judicial oversight to that process. I would also add that in the last go-round, I had, at UBCM, I had a conversation, and before that, I had a telephone conversation with Minister Farnworth, the public safety minister. My impression, put it this way, my impression is that he was fully on board with the idea that we should be able to use the high-resolution images from the cameras, but the person standing in the way was the privacy commissioner, and he didn't just come out and say it, but it was pretty obvious, and from subsequent actions, it was obvious that they were not prepared to change legislation or do something that would assist us with the privacy commissioner in that way. I think this is a very important issue. It's important for the safety of our community. It's something that we as a city have invested millions of dollars in. I think the analysis is going to not only involve our GM, but also our GM of legal affairs. And we're going to have some answers as to how this can be approached. And I won't speak for the RCMP, but I'd be surprised if they aren't on board with this particular initiative. They certainly were in the past very, very supportive of what we're trying to do. In fact, a lot of the original discussions came from the RCMP and the benefits that would come from these intersection cameras. So I'm fully on board. Thank Councillor Heed for bringing this. And I look forward to the analysis and what's to come by the end of the year.
Thank you. Councillor Hobbs?
I thought I saw Councillor Al there, but thank you, and through the chair. Yeah, I'll be supporting this today without any doubt whatsoever. The expectation of privacy in public is a bit of a red herring. Courts have ruled on this before, including, I believe, all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the expectation of privacy in public places is not absolute. So that is not an issue for cameras in public spaces. Quite frankly, one of the most important things we do as a government at any of the 3 levels is the protection of the public and protecting our community. And if you were to talk to any number of people in the public and say that we have these cameras throughout the city, yet we are artificially kept from having them at a quality of resolution that allows us to identify somebody shooting at police officers, fleeing the airport, or somebody kidnapping a child from a place, or any number of serious offenses, the public would be shocked and mortified by that. It's just not a supportable position. And it's not like police are going to sit there and watch what would be generated, which would be probably a couple million hours worth of videotape. You don't do that. There's a specific incident, there's a specific time, there's an offense, there's a description of people you're looking for, and that is what would be examined in this kind of process. There would be robust policy. You'd either need, as has been mentioned, a judicial authorization or some sort of policy that very much protects the rights of people, and there are no fishing expeditions. So cameras definitely displace crime, they disrupt crime, and they deter crime. But equally important, maybe more important, there's absolutely no doubt whatsoever all over the world, cameras help police solve crime. So This is a very good move, I think, by council. I support it fully, and absolutely it will help authorities detect and solve serious crimes that are very closely guarded by judicial authorization. So it's a win-win. And the idea that, I just want to emphasize that there's this absolute right to privacy in public places, that's not supported by the courts. It hasn't been in numerous cases. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wolf is joining us online. Go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair, to the mover and council. I've spoken on this previously. I am opposed to the referral. I'll state some of the reasons now, and if it continues, I've stockpiled a bunch more. Anyhow, I see this as a very slippery slope. We've been given previous approval to put up traffic intersection cameras for traffic-related incidents. By switching them to high resolution, all of a sudden, the use of the cameras takes on a whole new level. Previously, the Privacy Commissioner ruled that it is not to be allowed, not to be given that authority to the RCMP to control, let alone a municipality. And we're now potentially going to try and be aggressive and push to take the lead role in doing so. You can ask many Richmond residents who are maybe former residents or visitors of China that are completely fearful to go there because of high resolution cameras. I've never been, but a number of the stories I've told is if you jaywalk across the street, all of a sudden your face is blasted on screens, and you're shamed, and you're caught for doing something as minuscule as that. Although there can be many problems with jaywalking. So another way that this is a slippery slope is, we allow high resolution for crime, serious crime events, like the shooting that happened at YVR. All of we to be able to do that, to be able to respond to that incident, we would have to have the capability to turn on and be able to monitor and be able to go back to get footage from all of our cameras. That's a lot of staff time. That's a lot of cost. That's a lot of shifting the necessary work that law enforcement and our municipal support staff have been hired to do. I've read that some budgets in Britain, the cost of having the monitoring of systems like these take up about 20% of the police budget. I don't know how accurate that would be for here, but that's what I've read. The history shows that surveillance technology in many places and examples continually expand their use. For example, start with low resolution. The next stage would be high resolution. The next stage would be constant monitoring, maybe full monitoring with people observing every screen all the time. Maybe it would switch to night vision. Maybe it would have see-through vision. Maybe it would have facial recognition software. Maybe it would have augmented AI, artificial intelligence. Where do we draw the line? This is a critical moment, and I encourage council to defend the public, the citizens that elected you. In closing, just to comment on some of the things that were stated. This is not a unanimous supported move. It has not been even before my time on council. We do have ongoing violent gang activity. We're going to hear about it in the RCMP briefing a little bit later on as well. And I was looking into that ahead of this. And the high percentage, the majority of these violent drug-related crimes are happening at YVR. So there's been all this criticism of the provincial privacy commissioner, where I think there should actually be, I'm surprised there is not, more comments towards the federal privacy commissioner. If so much of the issues are stemming out of the airport, which is under federal jurisdiction, then maybe the airport should be the place where high-resolution cameras are capturing everybody's face. Maybe the 6 crossings off of Sea Island, where the airport is, should have a ability to block movement so cars can no longer cross the river. If the culprits want, they can try jumping in the river and see how that goes for them. I don't think the system as it is useless. We've heard, or I've heard many examples of the RCMP using footage that they can already get to determine who's at fault of a crime, a street crime. The network of private cameras is extensive, and that is, I think, a solution that council could work towards to find the homeowners, the businesses that are on interior roads, so that the RCMP can quickly contact those people to get access to their footage. Someone the other day, they had their car parked, they were away from their car, and someone drove into their car. And a few hours later, this person went back to their car, got in, and the car said, "Someone hit my car while you were away." The car robot, whatever, was telling them and showing them the footage of the car that hit them and the license plate that hit them. The technology is there, it's incredible, and that's what we need to link up, not destroy the public trust through turning these into high-resolution cameras. Thank you.
Councillor Day.
Thank you very much. I have so much I want to say, but I'm not going to speak too long. It's all been said. Sometimes the smallest piece of evidence can crack a case wide open and solve a serious crime like a murder or a child abduction. The cameras are all over the city, owned by residences and businesses. And if those people want to share their footage with the Richmond News, which Global BC or any other person, they have no restriction. And yet Richmond, the city of Richmond, does. And there is no expectation of privacy when you're out in public. You could be walking in front of my house and my camera could catch you as you walk by. This is life. This is the way it is now. There are cameras everywhere. Every car pretty much has a camera in the front. So to think that the intersection cameras are somehow going to wide open this quagmire of public privacy is illogical. We would be under very, very strict rules. Just like Richmond City councillors, all of us have to be very careful about what we do and who we associate with. And we can't just, go out to dinner 5 nights a week with developers. We are held to a higher account. The city in general is held to a higher account than the general public. In order for us to get this footage, we would have to prove there has been a crime on this date, at this time, in this location. And only the footage for that particular crime would be eligible to be viewed by the police. And that is the biggest difference. Whereas, I don't know if you recall, but at Williams and Shell Road there, we put in a stoplight there, a signal, because the camera from the house right at the corner showed over and over and over and over again that people were running the stop sign. Well, the reporters went straight to that house, asked for the footage. Oh yeah, sure, here you go. And you saw car after car after car run through the intersection, which justified our stop sign. My point is that the city is held at a much higher account. And we have the responsibility to uphold the law on both sides. On one hand, we have to follow the law that we cannot get footage that we do not have direct evidence for. On the other hand, we're supposed to solve crimes. We're supposed to keep people safe. That's our responsibility as a city. And we can do a heck of a lot better job if we have access to this information. So right now, when I went for a little drive around with RCMP recently, there was a police officer who was sitting in his car all day long waiting for someone to come in or out of a house doing personal surveillance. Now, is that a better use of time? or solving a crime with direct evidence from a camera after a crime has been solved. We can make our first responders so much more efficient if we give them this one little tool in these very specific situations. We need to modernize the system. And I think the Privacy Commissioner is out to lunch. You know, the world has changed, and it's time to understand that it has changed. We need to reflect today's technology. I talked to Councillor Heed about this, and I'm so impressed with the information that Councillor Heed and Councillor Hobbs can provide, because they have life experience working in law enforcement. And the fact that Councillor Heed has taken so much time to do the investigation, to do tons of research, talk to all the right people, I really appreciate. I can't thank you enough for that. Now, when it comes to worrying about whether someone's going to be jaywalking and someone's going to be watching, well, that's ridiculous. I'm sorry. We're not a communist country. We give people the freedom to go about as they see fit. We're not talking about monitoring all the cameras and spending hundreds of hours by police or other law enforcement officers. We're simply going to ask for specific time at a specific date for a specific location, which will save us a lot of time. I don't think this is a slippery slope, because I can tell you as a counselor, there is no darn way I will ever approve the use of these cameras for general surveillance. That is going too far. And so as long as we have the restrictions in place, which are already there, and in our memo from staff, I don't think we have anything to worry about, because I do not see any time ever in the future where we're going to allow us to live in some kind of state where everybody watches everything you do. This is simply solving the crimes that are at hand. And I think that to not do this is irresponsible. We just in the news today, I read that there's a house over on Chatsworth, I think it's called. In a matter of 3 days, the house has been shot up twice. Wouldn't it be nice if we knew at this time, on this day, a white, Suburban was in front of this house, we could actually catch these people, because guess what? They're going to come back. And maybe the next time they come back, they shoot some poor mother walking down the street with a stroller. How can we protect the public if we don't have this evidence? So I will be supporting this when it comes to council. I'm not a member of this committee, so I can't vote today, but I sure as heck would if I could.
It's a referral.
It's a referral, so it won't come to council. Councillor Glanders.
No, it's a okay. I was thinking that this would be on the consent agenda on Monday if everybody voted for it, but it's just going to go through if this committee votes in the referral, and then we would vote on it when it comes back to council. Okay. I agree with all the. I agree with the comments of Councillor Wolf for the most part. I think that. It makes a lot of sense. This seems very simple in that it would just be catching serious crimes, but I'm not convinced that 10, 15 years down the road it'd be like, oh, well, why don't we monitor this intersection to catch something before it happens, or let's start using this to catch a crime before it happens. And I think we have such a safe city overall. I just don't know if it's worth risking the trust of the public, like Councillor Wolf said, the people that pay the city tax dollars, that we should be using these cameras to have everybody's personal footage. I think it's a slippery slope. But I mean, the arguments for it are very convincing as well. But I don't want the city to go down this road, so I'm going to vote against it.
Mr. Mayor, you'd like to speak again?
Yeah, I just want to reflect that those comments, the comments of the councillor who's off-site, ignores the fact that there's a judicial process here. I mean, does the fact that the police or officials are allowed to get a search warrant mean we are going to allow police eventually to just walk into a place because they feel like it and do whatever they want and search the place? No, the fact is there's a judicial process which is a limitation. And that's what is contemplated here, is that there would be a judicial process. It's not, the RCMP wouldn't come to the city or whoever has the images They wouldn't come to the city and say, listen, just give it over. They would have to go through a judicial process, as has been stated, stating the time and the place and the circumstances enough to justify the release of those images. And it would have to be for a bona fide law enforcement type of process. So to say that this is a slippery slope, no, it's not a slippery slope, because there are safeguards to make sure it's not.
Councillor Wolf wants to speak again from another world.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'll be much briefer this time. I just have a few comments. I didn't realize that this wouldn't go to the council. I interpreted it wrong. Anyhow, the three other comments I wanted to make were that this intrusive technology doesn't have proportional balance between the benefits and the risks. This would change the experience for people to go out in public. It would have a chilling effect on many members, many citizens, many visitors. This would be the only place, perhaps in Canada, where there would be that type of technology watching them. That probably wouldn't feel the same if you were on the other side of the river. It doesn't offer protection against terrorism, people who do suicide bombings, because they don't care. They actually want to be seen doing things. And finally, there's no guarantee that there'll be no abuses of this power. It's unfortunate, but in any career, any institution, there's always a potential for a bad apple, somebody to do what they're not supposed to. Be it voyeurism, be it discriminatory targeting, abuse for personal purposes, spying, harassing, or criminal abuse, or accessing this information, getting leaked. Have we not heard of data breaches? Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone that's spoken. I'm wondering, perhaps with staff, UBCM, and putting forward a motion for next year's UBCM might be one of the things we also consider. Thanks to everyone who spoke, and I'm curious as to why some people are so concerned about protecting criminals. As Malcolm Brody mentioned, in the instance where they're going to be able to look at the footage, it's because a crime has occurred. It's not because they're trolling for crimes, it's because a crime has occurred, and it's a serious crime. It's not a shoplifting, it's not anything else. Ironically, the information that's on a private camera's open season for everyone. So I guess that begs the question, should we be selling our cameras to a local business improvement association, and then are they now private? Is that information now private and we can buy it back from them? Set up a contract back with them so we can get the information back? I know many of us brought these cameras in the first place because, and I know it's hard for everyone to remember this, but once upon a time the Canucks were in the finals. There was a riot, and it took well over a year for anyone to be brought to justice or to even be charged. Meanwhile, in the UK, they had a riot, and the next day they were knocking people's doors down and dragging them to justice because they had cameras, because they knew who had done things, and they were able to act immediately. And if you're committing a serious crime, then you need to be brought to justice. And if we have the ability to do that, then we should be facilitating that, and we shouldn't be trying to hide the information and trying to protect people. We have the information, we have the technology. It's just a matter of putting the links together to make it available and done properly. So I will also be supporting this.
Question. Councillor Heed wants to talk.
Councillor Heed?
To wrap up.
Just to wrap up here, and I want to express my appreciation to people at this council table that do understand what we're doing here, what we're trying to do here, that do understand. We want Richmond to be a safe community, that do understand. We need effectiveness and efficiencies, and I'm sure we're going to hear homicide costs probably $1 million each homicide with what is going on here with the problems that we have associated to investigative techniques and how the courts have made it certainly worse. Councillor Day, she was right in saying this is not China. We're not monitoring 24/7. We're not doing AI. We're not doing facial recognition. We're not doing anything like that. The mayor pointed out this is upon some type of production order or judicial type of order to obtain the footage after a serious crime has been committed here in Richmond, BC. Certainly, some people at this council table are entitled to their own opinion, but not their own set of facts. And I think some of the facts that some members have talked about here are in error. They are the wrong facts. And I think going forward, we have an obligation to make sure that we have one of the safest communities we can in all of Canada, and that we put in the mechanisms to ensure that safety, not disrespecting human and civil rights. That's not what we're doing here. We're trying to create a mechanism to create a safer community for our constituents in Richmond. Thank you.
I'll call the question. All those in favor of the referral? Any opposed? Councillor Galanders is opposed. It passes. Thank you. And now we're going to call recess on the open community safety meeting. So. Welcome back, everyone. We'll call the community safety meeting, open meeting, back to order. Number 1B, property use and parking enforcement monthly activity report, June and July. Mr. Corrado.
To the chair, I have nothing to add, and I'm open to questions.
Councillor Hobbs.
Thanks, and through the chair. Well, again, thanks for the report. Just a quick question. I think page 15 regarding, well, actually, this is rhetorical a little bit, the short-term rental enforcement. I just wanted to acknowledge, I think, the work that's being done there. I know you have extra resources doing it right now. It's a big issue. A lot of people think it's impacting a lot of our housing stock and rentals, so I really appreciate that. An actual question, though, on page 11 would be, with the noise complaints, like how do they break down if you take construction out of it? But with regard to residential properties in particular, how would it break down in terms of what it is, and how much of it relates to perhaps the improper use of, what is a residential area?
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, roughly I would say about 60% of our calls over a 3-year average are related to construction, and everything else would predominantly fall into percentage of about 14 to 15% deal with mechanical related noise calls. That's to deal predominantly with HVAC systems. And then the remaining percentage would deal with calls in relation to landscaping. You'll see such things such as leaf blowers and that type of amount. That's roughly a smaller percentage.
Right, okay. And the reason I ask is because there have been some calls related to what could be termed, suspicious or probably unauthorized kind of activities in residential areas. And so just want to emphasize the importance of us, and I know you do, getting on that right away, because it really impacts the quality of life that people have and interferes, even in a criminal sense, with the lawful use and enjoyment of property. So I know you're doing a lot of work there, so thank you.
Have a recommendation. Mover, second. All in favor? Carried, thank you. Animal Protection Services, Mr. Bramhill.
Through the chair, I have nothing further to add, and I'm open to questions.
Any questions? Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Second, all in favor? Thank you. Business license activity report, Mr. Corrado, welcome back. I guess we could reorder them so you could just stay.
To the chair, I have nothing further to add, and I'm open to questions.
Any questions?
I have a question.
Councillor Galanders?
Thank you, Chair. Just one quick question on CS 25. I'm looking at the increase in business licenses, which is great and was identified as strong economic health. I was just curious if you had any pre-pandemic numbers of an average year for business license applications, just to see how it compares to 2018 or 2019.
Through the chair to Councillor Galanders, we definitely can provide that information back to you. I would also note just some of the numbers that were during the pandemic. There's 2020, we had 246 new business licenses that were issued within a second quarter, and then you can contrast that with 489 in 2023, so you'll notice a significant jump, but definitely we experienced an impact during the pandemic.
Yeah, so I was just curious if it was up in the 400 range, say, before 2020, so just to see how much of an impact it was and how much is just new times, new things, but, it's not urgent, but just curious. Thank you.
Carried. Fire Rescue Monthly Activity Report. Assistant Fire Chief.
Yeah, to the chair, I'll do an official introduction. Negligent on my part, I haven't done that in the past. So I'm Deputy Chief Al McGrath, and today I'm Acting Fire Chief Al McGrath. So nothing to add and open to questions.
Councillor Heed.
Yes, Thank you. I'm going to go back to Chief to the calls for overdose poisoning incidents, June and July 2023, and the opioids 11 and 7 in July. CS 38. And on the bottom there, Chief, you talk about the indoor and outdoor location in commercial properties or residences. If I had to ask you predominantly what area of Richmond are you attending these calls, would you be able to identify it?
Through the chair to Councillor Heed, I would have to do a little bit more digging. If it's not in this report, I'm not just going to throw a number out there. I would say it's all of Richmond. Are you asking particularly about outdoor or indoor or both?
A bit of both, and I guess, even if you just want to give an anecdotal, and we can try and confirm this later through a memo or something like that, I just want to know if it's focused, for example, near the central business district or within, say, a 2 or 4 block radius of the central business district here in Richmond. And that pertains to some of the services we have in place, whether it's connections or the low barrier housing or some of those other facilities that some of the people that have this severe health issue attend.
Through the chair to Councillor Heed, I can't give you a direct answer on that. I would need to do some research.
Okay, if you could just do something and get back to me on that, that would really be appreciated. But, again, I just want to thank you for dividing this up versus poisoning and opioids. I think that's something we need to focus on.
Through the chair to Councillor Heed, anecdotally, in my 30 years experience, I've gone to overdoses everywhere in Richmond.
Thank you.
Thanks, and through the chair, thanks for the report. A couple quick questions. Page 28, you talk about a couple of the exercises that you've done, and particularly when you go through the debrief, there's probably some pretty valuable lessons that you can take away from that. So could you just comment on how those went? I think they were around the tank farm on the island. So what were some of the takeaways from that and some of the valuable lessons that you've learned from the debriefs in particular and the exercise?
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, there's 2 sections in here. The Vancouver Airport Fuel Facility was a full-scale exercise, and that was to allow them to gain certification through the BC Energy regulators. So that was the employees doing a mock exercise of a fuel spill, as well as testing the mechanical abilities of the facility. That went very well. I can comment more on the second one, which is the YVR tailspin exercise. YVR is required to conduct annual training exercises that include both tabletops and full simulations. In my experience, tabletops are great, but simulations are much better. The first thing you notice is that the pace of the event is much slower. Lessons learned, specifically to your question, is whenever you bring multiple agencies together, the Achilles heel is always communication, always. We're always on different radio channels and frequencies. YVR has gotten much better. They've adopted the ICS system, and they run a full EOC with all the stakeholders represented in the EOC. So I've noticed a real improvement in the way these multi-agency simulations run. It's one of the best forms of training because, as you know from your police background, preparedness is the number one thing to, you want to make your mistakes on the drill ground, not in real life.
Yeah, separations and the preparation.
Correct.
And also, I think the communication's key when you pick up that phone and somebody on the other end from, real life operational simulations, right?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, that's another part is the networking. You get to know the people, and we have really good relationships with all the stakeholders in Richmond.
Yeah, that's good. Key thing. Just one other quick question. With the wildfires that are, I think, listed starting on page 32, it's kind of rhetorical, I think, but I take it most of those are human caused.
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, most fires in general are human caused. However, there's a variety of causes in Richmond, such as climate conditions, which can, the dry conditions can lead to fires starting easier. Smoking, outdoor cooking, mechanical causes such as trucks even driving through a blueberry field with a catalytic converter can start a fire. We've got hydro transformers, and as well, people experiencing homelessness can also attribute to fires.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for the report. Great information as always. Especially, I'm just looking at the significant events as well on CS 32 and 33, and it's good to see them all. It's fascinating to read all of the events that happened. I'm just curious about the electric vehicle battery removal relocation incident that happened. So that was obviously from a vehicle accident, and then the electric vehicle battery had to be removed safely. How common is that would happen in an EV accident? Do you know? Have you encountered that many times?
Through the chair to Councillor Galanders, no, it's not common. This was a first for us, and it was actually a battery getting ejected from the vehicle, which apparently it was designed to do. This was a very difficult scenario. It took several months for us to work through, dealing with Transport Canada, ICBC, numerous stakeholders, and that's just being concluded now, and we're still recovering costs from that. ICBC didn't want anything to do with it. So that was an eye-opener. We're now sharing that information with other fire agencies and first responders in the region.
That's interesting. And then going forward, there should hopefully be a streamlined process. This is what we do. This is what we did last time. And because, I mean, if everybody's going to start driving EVs, this is going to be not a once-in-a-while thing.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Gallant, agreed. It's an eye-opener. The whole EV battery and vehicle industry it creates new challenges for us, and we're always looking for ways to improve.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Again, thank you for the report. So on page 28, we talk about the VAFFC full-scale emergency spill exercise. This was done for the benefit of the VAFFC so they could acquire their certification?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, I wouldn't use the term benefit personally. I'd say it's a regulatory requirement for a fuel facility to be certified.
But without that drill, they wouldn't be able to get their certificate.
That's correct.
Okay, so this was just a spill exercise. Is there any plans to do a fire exercise in the event that the jet fuel tank farm caught fire?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, it was a full-scale fuel spill, which they do have a berm that can contain that. And if there is a fire, they did actually simulate. They do have fire suppressant systems that are on board and has been signed off by Richmond Fire. Our part in that was more as a participant, not so much a participant, more of an observer. We would only be responsible outside of the berm. They're fully responsible for their own fire protection,
Okay.
their staff.
Did that system include a foam fatale, which is whereby there's jets all around the inside of the tank that then would, within a minute, would stop the fire in the tank farm?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, there is a foam suppression system as well as mobile systems. So similar to Trans Mountain, they have cannons that can be moved, which can produce a huge amount of foam, and that's the best way to
So
suppress
the
it.
cannons that shoot into the tank itself?
The cannons are for the berm. The tank has a built-in system. It's if it breaches the tank and gets into the... So the berm is designed to contain 150% of the volume of the tank. So it's like a big pool. So if the fuel gets out, it's contained in there. If that was to catch on fire, then they would use their secondary system, which is we call them foam cannons.
I'd appreciate a memo on exactly how that's going to work, because there was a lot of discussion when these tanks were originally approved that the only efficient foam system is one that actually puts the fire out inside the tank. They don't want it. I mean, the people in other parts of the world, like down in the States, they actually have a system that puts it out before it escapes the actual tank. So if you could just fill us in on what the system is, I would certainly appreciate that information.
Through the chair to Councillor Day, Richmond Fire has already signed off on this, and I do believe they've been granted, let me check my notes. Provisional occupancy is being granted already.
Yeah, well, we all know if there was a jet fuel tank farm fire that was completely engulfed and not taken out by the foam, everybody in the area would just have to shelter in place because it would take a long time to put that fire out, as it did in Miami years ago.
Through the chair to Councilor Day, that is correct, but it doesn't go anywhere. It
Yeah.
just burns. We've had fuel tanks at YVR for decades, and I started at YVR. We have suppression systems there, berm systems there, in tank containment systems. They do work. We would be able to manage that. You are correct, it would burn for days, as did in Iraq.
Yep.
They burn, but often they let them burn off, and then they did eventually get them all out.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you very much through the chair. Sorry, I just missed the very beginning of this. So if there's a fire chief, if you could just reintroduce yourself for me first.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Wolf, I'm Acting Fire Chief Al McGrath.
Okay, thanks, Al. Sorry, I can't be there. I just had a couple of questions. I think Councillor Hobb covered the first one, which is about the wildland fires, the 3 of them. The second one I had was in relation to the specialized transport that's in the report on our page 30. Could you, because it was like twice as many as there were last year, could you just, if you know, what is the specialized transport that's referring to?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, I do. Those are YVR aircraft standbys, and I realize it's confusing, but that's how they're categorized in our report. It's quite common to have aircraft standbys. These are mostly precautionary. YVR does have their own fire department. Richmond Fire also supports them. So it is fairly routine for us to respond to these aircraft standbys.
Oh, okay. Just a follow up to that then. I know that these 2 tables here aren't really weighted, how much Richmond Fire staff are involved for each incident. Would you say that one of these YVR aircraft standby is quite a heavy weight, like it requires a lot of resources?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, I wouldn't say it requires a lot of resources. We're sending 2 trucks that 99% of the time are just standing by at either the South Guardhouse or the North Guardhouse. YVR Fire Rescue is the lead on this. We are just a support.
Okay, great. Appreciate that. And my last question then, which you touched on with the last 2 speakers, the Aircraft Fuel Facility Corporation's test run there of their equipment. I think I have 3 outstanding questions. One is there a video that Richmond Fire captured of the event that could be shared with council?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, not that I'm aware of. We were just a standby agency. They had a professional safety company running the entire exercise. I'm not sure if they videoed that or not, but we do not have possession of a video.
Okay. I read that it was a trial or drill of a spill, but was there actually any fire involved in this drill?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, no. We're not allowed, for environmental reasons, we're not allowed to train with fire, even smoke. We're limited on how we train with that.
Yeah. My last question then is, where did all the fire suppression spray, liquid, chemical stuff, where did it all go at the end of the drill? Where does that go?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, they used water as a simulation. Jet fuel, Jet A is basically diesel fuel. They wouldn't spill that. They used water, and it was more of a test of the berm.
So then I'm just not sure how they're actually testing the equipment, like the release of this suppression stuff, if they were just using water hoses as opposed to their actual pipes of stored equipment. If you get what I'm saying, when you go through a drill of something, you actually test the equipment. So to hear that Richmond Fire signed off on that, and I'm also just concerned for Richmond Fire staff being in a proximity. Like, were your staff aware of where the boundary would be of where you would be a vaporized, no longer a person, to where you might be safe, and like the level of protective gear you'd have to wear? Like, was it that evident to your officers?
There's a berm.
You just stood behind the berm.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, I think I understood your question. We're fully aware of the risks of firefighting. We train our entire career for those risks. We're prepared for those risks. We have full PPE. You have fire extinguishers in City Hall right now. I wouldn't have to go out and test that particular extinguisher. I'd have full confidence that it would work because it's inspected annually, as is the equipment at any facility. I think I miscommunicated when I said water. They filled the berm with water. We didn't put any, there was no suppression used. It was just basically moving the equipment, which is already certified. Testing of extinguishing Jet A fuel is done in other facilities, and then they make recommendations through NFPA what to use to extinguish.
Great. I look forward to the memo, and if you do find out that there was a video, I really think it'd be valuable to see. Thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, I will check if there's a video.
Okay, we have a recommendation. So moved. All in favor? Thank you. And Fire Chief briefing. Anything else you'd like to tell us?
Through the chair, I do have one thing to say. We had 13 new recruits start today. It's always an exciting moment for us. Thank you to council for supporting this. These 13 recruits replaced 13 retirees and a few members through attrition. So we've got them on board starting today. It was a very competitive market, and I'm happy to say we got 13 of the top-notch recruits. We actually recruited some from other fire departments. It's rare that firefighters leave other cities. We got 2 of them. And we also got several Richmond residents. So that's all I have. That's a good news story.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Richmond RCMP monthly activity report, June and July. Chief Superintendent Dave Chauhan.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, councillors, and members of the staff. I don't have anything to add to the report, but I welcome any questions or comments anyone may have.
Way to get to that button, Councillor.
Thank you. Thank you. See how quick I was? I beat Councillor
You could be
Hobbs.
quick with the questions.
Yes, I'll be very quick with the question. We've heard a lot here about these drug cases, and Chief, I really need, for clarification purposes, for some people, when we talk about on CS 49, we talk about the drugs thing, and we're talking about these drug files. I guess for my clarification, and probably the clarification of others, these aren't necessarily all drug arrests. Some are drug seizures. Some are at the mail terminal. Some are at the other. So we don't have this explosive drug issue happening within our jurisdiction, because that is really a misleading understanding of what's going on as far as that. Could I just get some explanation from you?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Heed, thank you for that question. We do have, I would say, a significant number of our drug files or seizures that are generated at YVR. Those are drugs that are intercepted either through CBSA or UPS, Canada Post, or other agencies, and ultimately they are turned over to the RCMP. So we end up opening a file, which ends up generating a stat, and that becomes a drug file. There's other proactive work that's being done by our Richmond gang enforcement team. So there's lots of proactive work when we are checking, known gangsters in the city and if whether they are vehicle stops or any other criminal code offense, and sometimes drugs are confiscated as well. But I would not say that, we have a drug problem, so to speak, but these are the files that are generated either through YVR or through other modes.
So just for clarification, there are no prolonged drug investigations that are going to take up a significant amount of investigative time.
Yes.
And we still have the federal enforcement agency working around there.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Heath, that is correct, yes.
Thank you. And the last one relates to the unfortunate incident we had where someone died in a tent fire, a vulnerable person. And I know you've got some great results from your vulnerable unit that you have in your detachment, and I think they do outstanding work. There was some possibly misunderstanding related to the media relations part of that. I wonder if you could just clarify what actually occurred with respect to that.
Absolutely, through the chair to Councillor Heath. This unfortunate incident of a homeless tent that caught fire and resulted in the loss of life of one individual. This incident occurred on September 6th. And the moment that the incident occurred, the global news, they had a cameraman at Costco nearby, and they noticed the police presence, and the cameraman had recorded some footage, and subsequently, a short while later, Global had sent a request to Richmond Media stating that their camera operator had captured footage of heavy police presence near Gage Road and Beckwith, and that the tents were taped off, and they requested details of what happened. And our Richmond Communications Unit Corporal was able to respond and provide some details to Global News during that time. 2 days later, on September 8th, we received an inquiry from Richmond News stating that RFR had extinguished a fire and had discovered a deceased male inside. And again, our media was able to respond to Richmond News on September 8th as well, that a male had been identified, but for privacy reasons, his name could not be or would not be released. And then yesterday again, we received an inquiry from Richmond News asking if there was any more information pertaining to the death. And again, a response was provided to Richmond News that the death was not believed to be criminal in nature, and that our GIS section had conduct of that file.
Thanks for that clarification. And I was talking to our media person here in the city yesterday with respect to this, and this is a very controversial item. We've, and as you and I have spoken about, we're starting to see this increase in homeless people that are occupying our public spaces and parks and stuff like that. And again, I cannot support anything more than just say, absolutely, you're a vulnerable person units. We may have to look at some increase in resources for you, whether they're from our city staff or whatever, in order to us to contain this particular problem. I think we've got to look at trying to be a little more proactive so the people of Richmond know what we're actually doing, and how I believe your unit had been there a few times talking to this individual. That's how we were able to identify him. And I read a story in the Richmond News today about, I guess, his girlfriend who was saddened by, of course she would be, from what happened. So I think this is something that we certainly need to start to focus a little bit more on, and Mr. Adams and all that, tying him into whatever way we can assist you.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Heath, I absolutely agree with what you have stated. Our vulnerable persons unit, they have been very, very busy working with our bylaw partners, RFR, Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction. There is constant and proactive engagement by all of these individuals and trying to help, trying to assist those folks who, whether they need some information as to where they can, have some shelter or have a bus ticket. I read that on a daily basis on our shift reports as to the great work that's being done by RCMP and all of our partners. So I totally agree. We are seeing more and more homeless individuals, homeless encampments, and that's going to require an increased response in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hobbs?
Thanks, and through the chair, well, first of all, thanks for that question and that answer. I agree with that a lot. It will take a lot more attention. Just a couple questions. First of all, just in reference to the attachment 2 with the crime stats and the increase, June year over year from 2022, and the mental health incidents, I think we're about 155 or so if you total them up. So have you noticed or had the chance to analyze yet any correlation between mental health incidents and particularly serious criminal offenses? An example would be an assault like we all heard about in Vancouver down in Chinatown over the weekend. Is there any correlation to that you can comment on?
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, thank you for that question. I don't have any specific stats or numbers available at this present moment. But what I can state is there is a correlation. There are incidents, whether it's a violent crime or petty theft. If we know the identity of the individual, and if we know there's underlying issues, and if that includes mental health, they are scored in our system that that individual had those issues and they were associated or involved with that crime. So there is a tracking mechanism, and I do hear and do see in our daily reports that there are those individuals who are suffering from mental health issues. They are involved in violent crime as well. But yes, we do have a tracking mechanism for that correlation piece.
Well, I think you could probably attach the previous answer you gave to Councillor Heed's question in a way to this issue as well, because it is a matter of resources for a lot of people and allowing them to have off-ramps with the different issues they're facing for treatment to improve their lives. But it's important that I think we keep track of the correlation. And my last comment and question is about shoplifting. There were some significant increases as well in that, 79, 88% over the June period of this year versus last year. And I think it's really important for the public and for businesses as well to know that our local police, the RCMP, take that seriously, and that they are responding to shoplifting calls and they are making arrests and dealing with people in an effective way, because businesses are having a hard time surviving right now, and those can amount to huge losses. And you can see some horrendous stories across North America about the shoplifting epidemic. So if you could just comment a little bit, because I know that the Richmond RCMP has done a couple different projects, and I know you're working on it. And so I just want to say, thank you, but maybe you could just comment on the projects that you've run and what you have planned and what you can share publicly.
Sure, thank you to the chair, to Councillor Hobbs. As I have stated in the past, shoplifting impacts our businesses, and it's a crime which is important for me, important for our senior management team and our property crime teams and our frontline officers as well. We continue to work proactively with the businesses, with loss prevention officers, with transit police, with other partners, even other municipal police forces, in a joint coordinated fashion approach to target shoplifters. We have Vancouver, for example, they have done Project Barcode, where they target their shoplifting individuals, and we have boost and bust operations here. So those are constant and ongoing initiatives we have, and we know where the high risk areas are, the businesses that are targeted most often, and so we are taking a well thought out and a coordinated approach in ensuring that those individuals who are out there shoplifting, that, we'll be there to arrest them. So there's projects are underway, and there'll be some news coming out on that.
Good, and, I'm comforted, I suppose, by people's calls, including the Premier, for our government to look at different ways to deal with prolific offenders that are causing a significant amount of the grief.
Yes, and if I may, to the chair, to Councillor Hobbs, sometimes when we look at crime and crime trends, the tendency is, if it's, I'm speaking for Richmond, we may think that the offenders are all from Richmond, but that's not the case. We have open borders, and crime knows no boundaries. When I read the reports, I see sometimes from 2/3 to 3/4 of the individuals are non-Richmond residents. So, they come here because they may have been targeted in their jurisdiction, in their police jurisdiction, and they may have restrictions or curfews or whatnot, and then they're going to go to another place, and that's what I have seen here.
Yeah, that interagency cooperation that we heard about earlier, that's important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll just be very brief. Just have one question, and it's kind of a follow-up to Councillor Heed's question under the drugs category on page 49. So I read it as that in June we had double the number of drug file incidents than the month of May. In July, there was double the number of incidents to July the year before. And what is being attributed to all of this is the process of backlogs of drug exhibits from Canadian Customs seizures at YVR. So my question is, why do we have such backlogs? Because this, for one, it's alarming to see these numbers, but as Councillor Heed pointed out, it may not be that they all are falling on these 2 months. And then the other part to that is that when we label this as an incident, we're only catching some. Maybe it's just a fraction, I don't know, nobody knows, of the actual drugs coming in. We're told as council that the drug crisis is not going away, it's still going up and getting worse. And so I think making sure there is no backlogs, that we're getting accurate data and we're addressing it and we're responding immediately with the right enforcement and RCMP response and funding from the federal government, because this is under their jurisdiction. Do you have any comments on that? Thanks.
Yes, thank you to the chair, to Councillor Wolf. This is, I would say, is the exception in this report. During COVID, there were a lot of drugs were seized by CBSA and they were stored. And typically those, no case drug seizures, small amount of paraphernalia or any amount of drugs that were intercepted by CBSA were seized by them, and typically they would get turned over to the RCMP. We used to have a reserve constable member who used to handle those during COVID, but again, because of COVID, and that was suspended. So that's what created that backlog of those exhibits, and so we'll have that sorted out, and this will be rectified shortly.
Thank you. Councillor Day.
Well, that sort of leads to the question that I was going to ask as well. So given that 81% of the cases are at YVR, have we lobbied the feds to pay for, the integrated teams and the RCMP officers that now have to clean up that backlog?
To the chair, to Councillor Day, that's an excellent question. It's, somebody seizing a pipe or a drug residue with CBSA, yes, they should be turned over to FSOC individuals, so to the federals. That is something that has come to my attention while I was reviewing this too today, and that is something that I'll follow up with our federal serious organized crime FSOC folks, and we'll try to see, realign our responsibilities. I mean, if this is something that should be handled by them, then it should be handled by them. So I'm going to be looking into that.
Yeah, and I think that maybe council should consider writing a letter. Once you get more information, maybe that would be a good time for council to write a letter to the federal entity, whoever that is, and say, right is right, and this is a federal responsibility. We expect to be compensated.
Yeah.
So I think that's something we should seriously think about doing. Okay, my next question was homeless. As we know, there's a group of people in downtown Vancouver or downtown Richmond that regularly phone and write about the homeless people. And I've been told that being homeless and loitering is not a crime, and that it's just something that's part of life. But we cannot forcibly remove these people and take them to the shelter in Ironwood. What can we do, and what is the RCMP doing to educate the public on how your hands are basically tied in many ways?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, as I had addressed previous questions, going back to, first of all, our vulnerable persons unit and, working with our bylaws and RFR and Ministry of Social Development, Poverty Reduction folks. Great work is being done. Can we enhance, communications to inform the public? Certainly we can do more, but I would say behind the scenes, we are doing a lot. And we really, everyone that's involved there, they are deeply care about these individuals and they want to help them, but we can't force them. And that's what I'm hearing. There are individuals who are simply entrenched in their lifestyle in that place. And when our bylaw friends, when we work with them, when we do give someone 2 weeks to say, okay, you have to move from here, they simply go somewhere else, but within the same city, but not to a facility. So it's a tough issue, but I can certainly look at something along with our city partners and see if there's something we can send to the public so they know, the great work that we are doing and that we're not, neglecting or forgetting these individuals there.
Yeah, I think that'd be very valuable because our heart goes out to them. But I can imagine if someone is living in an apartment and there's homeless people hanging around the front and leaving garbage, it's going to upset you. And I get that, I respect that. But what can we do? We can try to help them, we can try to educate them, we certainly provide regular services, but we can't force them to get the help that they really should be getting. They have to make that choice for themselves.
Yes, and through the chair to Councillor Day, again, my example with the shoplifters, we have individuals who are displaced from other communities.
Yep.
And we see new people here.
And tomorrow we have an update on our homeless strategy at planning, so more to come.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a recommendation on the floor. All in favor? OIC briefing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just only one thing I wanted to bring up just for your quick awareness piece. Obviously, the wildfires have had a devastating impact to our people and communities across the province. As of yesterday morning, I believe there were 404 fires were burning and 5 new ones had started, and I believe 172 were out of control, and 14 were considered noteworthy, meaning that they caused significant risk to our communities. And then on August 31st, the province extended the provisional state of emergency until September 14th, and this extension was to support the ongoing response and recovery efforts caused by the wildfires. Your police force, your Richmond RCMP, along with other police forces, stepped up and provided that support to our communities, and we continue to do that. Those numbers have scaled down now, but it was very just requests coming in, last minute requests, and kudos to our teams and members who, who were so concerned about, what's happening in our province, that the teams were able to drop everything that they were doing to alter their family plans and go at moment's notice to help our colleagues and community members in need. So hopefully, end should be in near sight, but I am not receiving too many requests for emergency deployment. So let's just hope the situation gets better and we end this wildfire season soon. So that's it from me.
Thank you. Well, our thanks to the officers that spent time away from home and family and stepped up. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Manager's report. No manager's report. Move adjournment. You're adjourned.